Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It was perhaps the biggest speech of Mark Carney's political career. The Canadian Prime Minister on Tuesday in Davos, Switzerland, doubled down essentially on his position that we're moving towards a new world order.
Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition.
Carney didn't specifically name-check U.S. President Trump or the United States on a whole, but his speech amounted to a rallying cry for smaller countries to band together against what Trump is doing.
We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
I'm Richard Southern, and today on The Big Story, we dive into Carney's landmark address, looking at what he said and at why it's so important. Joining us is John Wright. He's the CEO of Canada Pulse Insights, a veteran pollster and a veteran political observer. John, thanks for being back here with us on The Big Story.
Good to be with you, Richard.
I mean, boy, this was a big speech. I mean, clearly the biggest speech of Mark Carney's political career. Did it meet the geopolitical moment, do you think, John?
Oh, I think absolutely. It was said at the end that not many people at Davos get standing ovations, and this prime minister got one after delivering this speech.
What was he trying to say in the speech? You had to do a lot of reading between the lines here. What was he trying to say?
Well, I think you have to step back before we answer that and say, who is Mark Carney? And Mark Carney is someone who's been on the international stage for a long time and knows a lot of people in that room who respect him very much. And while he admits that Canada is a middle power, he basically laid out a few key elements that every other nation in the world has to try and follow. He started out by talking about Václav Havel and how he had said at one point when asked he asked rhetorically, how did the Soviet Union and communism get to be the way it is? And that is, he said that the grocer put up a sign in his window saying that, workers of the world unite. And he said everybody else in the town put it up. And he was using this as a story, as a narrative. And he said everybody knew it was a lie. And he said everybody believes it as a lie until someone starts taking it down. And once people start taking it out of their windows, then you are actually dealing with the reality. And effectively what he was saying to the room was, we all know what the lie is. And the lie is that, and without naming the United States, that the world order that we knew before is no longer going to work as it was. And as a result, the true element of where we're headed is to a new world. And if you don't understand that it's a new world and you don't understand that it has new paths to it, then you are living in the past and living in a lie. The second thing he was basically saying was we all need to call it for what it is. And we need to do it individually, where we can pragmatically move out into the world and forge new alliances in a world that no longer has that old order. So I think he started out by saying, if everybody is quiet about what's going on in the world and doesn't call it out because they're fearful of retribution, then you are going to actually live in a subordinated society anyways. So we should find the strength in each other to call it for what it is. We should identify new ways of pragmatically opening up doors to each other. We should keep principles, which Canada said, we're going to keep some principles at stake, and that is democracy works and the United Nations works. And there's a whole way of doing things that are of value driven to us. But we're going to look at asymmetric geography. We're going to look at asymmetric pragmatic relationships, and we're going to craft the world in a new way, as opposed to simply believing that it exists the way it has for the last many, many decades. He called on everybody to call out what's going on, but didn't name the United States as being the big disruptor, but came as close to it. Everybody could read in the room what he was saying. So I think, Richard, it probably will be one of the most monumental speeches that a Canadian prime minister has made in decades, if not a century. I think people will look at this and call it the Carney Doctrine. But I think it also will have a huge resonance among all the world leaders who looked at him having been such a formidable player on the world stage previously, having built those relationships with all of those people in the room and outside of that, plus all of the work he's been doing over the last many months, visiting and trying to arrange deals. He said from the outset of his prime ministership that he would be dealing in a much more pragmatic way. And I think he simply confirmed what his thinking is and codified it for the rest of the room. So I think it was a really important moment for not only this country, but also for the global leadership who could listen to it and not only nod their heads, but then at the end get up and applaud it because it's basically what they're all thinking.
Yeah, finally someone perhaps stood up and said what a lot of these leaders were thinking. Here's Mark Carney talking about Trump without mentioning Trump.
Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
Is there a risk to him saying this? If he's kind of standing up now and maybe being the leading opposition voice to Trump almost, is there a risk to Canada? Our economies, of course, are so intertwined, Canada and the United States. We have this trade deal we need to renegotiate at some point, if indeed the prime minister intends to even renegotiate it. Is he running a big risk here of, upsetting Trump?
Honestly, on the same day that the president of the United States runs pictures of the United States flag in different countries, including Canada, when he's ramping up the rhetoric about who we are and what we are and why we should be, we're back to the 51st state argument, essentially. I don't know what more risk you can have. And I think that's what he was basically saying to the rest of the world. Look, the United States believes in the doctrine of power, the doctrine of power equals domination and subordination of nations. And we live now in a world where that risk is there. So, my own personal belief is I don't think that Donald Trump cares about public opinion in the United States. I don't think he cares about public opinion anywhere, really. I don't think that he believes that he has some risk in the world, that he is head of the most, critical armed forces in the world, and he can do what he wants. And I think what Mark Carney was saying is, look, we live in this world now that's full of risk. No matter what we say, no matter what we do, tariffs can come in a moment and we can be subordinated by that, or we can liberate ourselves and say, you know what, we're going to live with this, but we're going to do something about it. So, Richard, I think that, you might have said months ago, maybe 6 months ago, we should pussyfoot around. We should be very careful. We should try and accommodate Donald Trump. We should not make him upset. But we've seen the true colors of what the administration looks like. And I think Mark Carney effectively is saying, look, we have to live with this, but we can't stand still. And trying to accommodate Donald Trump is not going to work. We're just going to get more of it. So the speech, the clip that you played, I would encourage everybody to listen to the speech. It's not long. It's 20 to 25 minutes. It's incredibly well articulated. It does set out Canada's doctrine going forward in terms of how we are going to play in the world under this prime minister. And it makes a lot of sense given where it is. But outside of the realities of living with more tariffs and more threats from what comes south of the border, I don't know how else you play this except to go about doing your business without emotion and trying to forge relationships with other countries so that our economy and our own sovereignty can be protected with like-minded people outside of the United States.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into the next clip I want to play, a short one here, where the prime minister was urging like-minded countries to get together and kind of sidestep the United States. Here's the prime minister in Davos.
The middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. Canadians know that our old, comfortable assumptions that our geography and alliance memberships automatically conferred prosperity and security, that assumption is no longer valid.
You kind of touched on it moments ago, but this kind of gives us an indication now of what the Prime Minister was doing in Qatar and in China. He's building these other relationships he's talking about. He kind of wants Canada, it seems like, John, to be this bridge between Europe and Asia economically, right?
Well, I think he's saying, look, we all have to forge new relationships, be pragmatic about it. As I said at the outset, you are living in a lie if you believe the old rules are going to apply the way they have for the last many decades. And that is to almost believe in the lie that the free trade agreement would be negotiated. And throw that out the window. Like these things don't apply anymore. What does apply is not building fortresses around your own country, because you can end up with fortresses around the world of like-minded people, but they're never going to cooperate. The critical thing here is to get out and talk to people and find that even among those people, like the Chinese, which in fact are going to be held up as an example where Canada may be violating some of its principles. I mean, the Prime Minister was asked that question and said, look, I don't think it's appropriate to frame it that way. We must make relationships everywhere around the world right now. Now is the opportunity for us to do so. And if we are sitting down with China, it's because we have to. I mean, we can't sit down with the United States. We already know what their position is. We haven't got anywhere in any kind of cooperation. And the reality is he said as a leader, we will see what's going to suit us. We'll make the decisions at the end of the day, and that we believe that we'll put in guardrails that will allow us to have relationships there. But he's not closing off relationships with anybody. And I thought, Richard, at the end, he finally made the pitch for Canada to all of those in the room and said, we have what you want. We have the most educated people in the world. We have a capital of talent. We have stable government. We have values which you are seeking. We have a pluralistic public square that protects freedom of speech. I mean, you juxtapose this 2 hours later with the President of the United States standing in the press office and going through all of his accomplishments during this first year in office. And it's incredible to hear so many things about the domination of others within his society and outside of it. And at the same time, the Justice Department is serving and charges against the leaders of Minnesota. I mean, the juxtaposition of Mark Carney versus the United States, that we are literally hours or miles away or kilometers away from each other. And you could not find two different societies operating at the current moment. So look, I think I can't do justice to what the Prime Minister said. It's an incredibly good speech to read and to understand where he's headed. It's very articulate, and it struck a note in the room that I think everybody there will respect exactly what he said. The critical thing for Canada, though, and for all of us is to make some fundamental decisions about how we are going to move forward as a collective group. I mean, I cannot imagine, and I'm not saying this in a partisan way, I cannot imagine Pierre Poilievre making that same speech. I cannot imagine him dealing with the world leaders the way that this Prime Minister has. I cannot imagine Pierre Poilievre dealing with opening the doors and walking through them in the same way that he, on the rhetorical side, has been over the last year. No, we've changed the page, and we have a Prime Minister who has relationships in place and a vision in place that says we've got to be pragmatic but principled at the same time, and he's going to bring to the table the relationships that he has to make this country great.
John, there will be those who are critical of the speech, and I think the big question in my mind is it's all well and good for the Prime Minister to come out and say these things. It's another thing to practically do it, all right? I mean, Canada cannot ignore the United States. We need a trade agreement with our biggest trading partner, do we not?
Well, you may not get one. I mean, I guess his question is, do you want a trade deal on your knees, or do you want to stand up and be with like-minded people? And he started to list all the deals that are being signed, at least 12 of them in terms of trade relationships. I mean, we have European countries who are now setting up economic blocks with South America and with India and with other countries around the world. I think he's on the same wavelength as most of the major countries in Europe and beyond, who see that their reliance of stability with the United States, which provided for a stable global way of working, is now over. And so his approach right now is to say, look, we're going to be threatened today. We're going to be threatened tomorrow. That shouldn't paralyze us. We should remember who we are, and as principled as we are, find like-minded people. But you can't depend on what's next door, and we're certainly not going to be on our knees servicing a country next door that basically is throwing its military and economic might around the world, because just standing here and complying to it is just like that shopkeeper in the grocery store who puts up the sign in the window saying everything's okay and we will all unite together and be friends. What the Prime Minister said today was, if you think that the construct of the past is workable, and that includes all the deals that we've done and all the institutions, then you are living in a fiction. And the time is now to begin to lead in crafting a new world within the new circumstances. And I don't know any other way for us to go forward as a country except to see what the world is as opposed to what you'd like it to be.
Then there's the matter, John, of Greenland. I mean, you talked about fiction there. I mean, it would seem fictional only a few weeks ago for the United States to launch an invasion of Greenland, but that's not so storybook anymore. Here's what the Prime Minister had to say in Davos on the matter of the U.S. wanting to acquire Greenland.
We stand firmly with Greenland and Denmark and fully support their unique right to determine Greenland's future. Our commitment to NATO's Article 5 is unwavering. So we're working with our NATO allies, including the Nordic-Baltic 8, to further secure the alliance's northern and western flanks, including through Canada's unprecedented investments in over-the-horizon radar, in submarines, in aircraft, and boots on the ground.
John, he mentions boots on the ground, though it's not yet clear if Canada will send troops. We know the CBC is reporting that he's considering, Mr. Carney, sending Canadian troops for NATO exercises in Greenland. Do you think the Prime Minister's navigating this whole situation correctly?
Yeah, I think he is. And I think, again, it's as you said from the outset, I mean, he sits in a very vulnerable situation right next door to the bear, right? The bear is no longer the Soviet Union. The bear is no longer Russia on that side of the ocean. The bear is who's going to eat you next door. And so he's being very careful in terms of how he walks the line and what he says, even though we're reading between the lines and we understand exactly what he's saying. So I think he will take his time and make sure that the agreement is there. But look, to put some kind of military presence there, I think he will, but it'll take some time for him to make that decision. As long as he's got, the appropriate amount of both symbolic and significant military effectiveness for what he wants to do. I don't know what that's going to be. It could be announced as soon as, the next 24 hours, the next 48 hours. But what I did hear him to say was a commitment to NATO. He also has to remember that we're part of NORAD, and that NORAD is the United States and Canada. So he has to walk the fine line because, as I said, the bear lives next door now, and the bear is making all kinds of threats to our own sovereignty. So he's going to take it a step at a time.
No matter how you feel about it, truly a landmark speech by the Canadian Prime Minister at the World Economic Forum. Thanks for breaking it all down for us, John Wright. Really appreciate you being back on The Big Story.
Great to be with you, Rich.
John Wright, CEO of Canada Pulse Insights. And that was The Big Story. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. Shoot us an email at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can get new episodes of The Big Story every morning, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave us a comment or share with a friend. I'm Richard Southern. Thanks for listening.